Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Noelle, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to today's webinar. Today's session is about managing change without a change manager. Very interesting topic hosted by Dylan Zimmerman, Director of Delivery here at Gravity Union. With that, I will now pass it on to you, Dylan.
All right, thanks, Noel. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to start by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about Gravity Union, our organization. I am a PMP certified and ProSci certified project manager and change manager with about 20 years experience in the information management space. So working with Microsoft 365 and SharePoint, as well as other information management and enterprise content management platforms, OpenText, IBM FileNet. I've done a lot of these implementations over my career. I've done that implementations and support for public and private sector organizations. Again, I've had both, those project and change manager roles as well as business analyst roles, and I was a records analyst at the start of my career. So I've held a lot of different roles throughout these types of projects over the years. So that's a little bit about me. Gravity Union, who we are. So we are a consulting firm based in Vancouver, BC, Canada, although we have clients all over North America and the world. We are a Microsoft Solutions partner, as well as we partner with a number of other software vendors who provide applications that support use of M365 and SharePoint and managing records and so forth. So you can see some of our partners there on the left side. What we're going to cover today in the webinar. I'm going to start by going over some of the fundamentals of change management. Some of the kind of textbook stuff that'll help to put context around what we're really going to address here, which is without a change manager, how are you going to get this done? So how can we integrate change management into other project roles that you have? And how are we going to approach that? So what are the things that each of these team members can take on to successfully manage change without that one change manager role? And then we're going to look at, okay, and how do you sort of integrate that to a project in terms of the processes that you follow as you deliver your project? That's kind of what we're going to cover on the agenda. But we're going to start by looking at our problem statement. So what kind of situation are we in here, and what are we trying to solve? For our example today, we're going to say that we are doing a digital transformation project to implement SharePoint Online across an entire organization. So this includes migrating both users and their content and their processes from, let's call it a diverse legacy content management environment, which probably many of you are very familiar with this. You have things on shared drives. You may have things on your personal drive or C drive. You might have things on your desktop or in your desk drawers or in legacy applications. So this is a very common scenario that we all face as we want to move to SharePoint Online. We want to gather all our things and bring them together into one platform to use going forward. So that's a big change. That's a big change for individuals. It's a big change for the organization at large. And here's the rub. We don't have a change manager on our project team, and you don't have approval or a budget to hire one. We got to make do with the roles and the people that we already have. And as always, the show must go on. How we're going to tackle that problem is by first defining the change management activities that we're going to execute. So if you did have a change manager, what would that person be doing? And what are the outcomes you need to get as a result? We're then going to look at, okay, well, what project team members do we have and what are their skill sets? And then how do those skill sets that they have align with those change management activities? We're going to then lean on that analysis to develop an achievable plan to integrate change management into those other roles, as well as to our project processes that we execute. So we're going to do that, and very importantly, we're going to also monitor the success of that and adapt over time. So that's essentially our approach to solving this problem of needing to manage change without a change manager. The first thing we're going to do is define change management. We're going to want to understand, like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to achieve? Why are we doing change management in the first place? Of course, we want to ensure that as we deliver this SharePoint-based solution, that we want users to adopt it. And more than adoption, we want that adoption to stick, right? We want to have sustained usage over time, so things don't sort of start to peter out after that initial uptake. A lot of that use of technology and consistent and long-term use of technology is driving behavioral change. So we may need people to change their processes and the way they work. They need to learn new things and remember how to do those. So we need those behavioral changes to stick with people. And while we do this, we want to keep stakeholders happy and engaged. And that will contribute to the adoption and sustained usage. If people have a good experience through the project, they've got a positive view of what that solution looks like. They've helped to build it, and they've been engaged in that process, and that's going to help us. I'd like to throw it out there as well for any other thoughts anyone has in the chat on why we do change management. Okay, yeah, keeping stakeholders aligned, getting them aligned, that's great. Totally agree with that. So ultimately, the key message here is that our project is delivering technology, but the value and the benefit realization of that is driven by people using it and using it in the right way. Ensuring successful adoption, absolutely. Thank you for those that chimed in there. So let's start with a little bit of background on organizational change management. So this is from ProSci's materials and definition of these processes. But when we're doing change management in the context of a project, there's sort of three major phases. We're going to prepare for it, we're going to manage it, and we're going to reinforce it after the change has gone live, once we have our new system in place. So that first phase, when we're preparing for change, there's a few kind of major steps and some activities listed on the right side. I've highlighted in orange the ones that are particularly relevant for our conversation today. So, we're going to define our strategy for change management. We're going to prepare our team, and we're going to develop our sponsorship model. And I can't stress the importance of that last one enough. Assessing, preparing, and defining the roles and activities of project sponsors is absolutely critical to project success. So we're going to focus a little bit on that today as well, as what we can do to engage sponsors, how do we define and identify sponsors, what should they be doing, so on and so forth. So that's kind of all our prep and setup to go through this process. Our second phase is then managing the change. So I'm going to cover briefly, but covers the 5 standard plans that we have in change management, which are communications, sponsorship, coaching, training, and resistance management. And we're going to look at how those plans align with the roles we do have in our project today and who can contribute to what. So we're going to make these plans, we're going to action and implement those plans, we're going to monitor them and adapt as needed throughout the project process to make sure things are going well. Lastly, we need to reinforce the change. So one thing that I often like to say is that the last day of the project for the project team is actually like the first day of the new world going forward for everyone that you've delivered this project to. So when you're living in the project world, it's easy to think about the start end and the start date and the end date of the project, but really that end date is not the end date of the solution. That's really the start for everybody else who's going to be using it going forward. So reinforcing the change has to happen continuously and proactively after the project has gone live. So we want to be listening for feedback, identifying gaps, adapting, updating the solution or processes as they need to support continued adoption and success. So those are sort of the three, major process groups that we have around managing change within a project. I'm going to put a bit of different lens on change management, look at kind of what is change management in a different light. So change management is a set of processes, like we just talked about. It's also a knowledge domain. So there are certainly, lots of textbooks and materials on change management and the human side of that. How do we apply it? So there's a whole domain of knowledge that's out there. It's also a skill set. So it's not just one skill, it's many different skills that come together to be able to manage change effectively. And ultimately, change management is a critical success factor for your project. We need change management to be successful. I think everyone on this call probably knows that. That's why you've joined today. You know it's very important. But the unfortunate part in our scenario today is that change management is a role that we don't have available to us. But despite not having that role, we can leverage everything else you see in this list. We can leverage the roles we do have and get them to work with those processes and bits of knowledge and leverage their skills to get that success we need at the end of the day. So next, I'm going to talk about how we integrate change management activities into those other project roles. This is kind of the part one of this. So I'll talk about the roles, the skill sets. Then we're going to do a little more kind of fundamentals of change management and then come back to the project process. But I'll just pause quickly in case there's any questions in the Q&A, Noel.
No questions so far, but one person sent in the chat. This person said, when we are working on changes, we want them to see themselves involved in the new system so they buy in, which is
Yeah, and
really great point. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. And I 100% agree with that. And that's one of my key philosophies is that you don't want to, kind of deliver a project to someone. You want them to actually join you on the journey throughout. So if they feel that they're a part of the process, they've contributed to that solution, they feel some ownership over, hey, this is a solution that I helped build. It's my solution. They're going to really want to adopt and use that. They're going to have some pride in that and they'll feel a sense of ownership. So yeah, getting that buy-in by getting stakeholders engaged is a huge goal of ours for sure. So let's look at in our scenario here the project roles that we do have, as well as some of the skill sets that are needed to effectively manage change. So we're going to have on this team a project manager, a business analyst, a technical specialist, like a developer kind of role, or migration specialist, and then a trainer as well. So we've got these four roles to lean on. Um, on the right side of the screen, I've listed a bunch of change management skill sets that we have, or that are out there or needed by a change manager. So I won't read them all, but things like building relationships, being good at communicating and training approaches for people, being able to listen, have empathy, manage some resistance, help people work through this change, being able to define benefits and articulate that, coach people through the change. These are all some of the skill sets that a change manager has that we're going to look for in our other project team members. And if anyone has any other ideas, I'd love to hear that in the chat about what other types of skill sets you might see in a change manager. So I'll keep an eye on that in the chat as we go here. But what we're going to do here in this next slide, and purely as an example, is mapping these skill sets to the roles. And I want to stress that this is just an example for our hypothetical team. When you do this for your own project team, I'm sure the check marks will be laid out in a different way. So you've got to look at, okay, who is my project manager and my BA and my technical person and my trainer, and what are the personal traits and skills that those individuals have. So this is an exercise that we need to do. You don't just take the slide and run with it. But for our example today, this is what it might look like. So each individual on this team has a certain set of skills associated with them as a person. They've got different experience that they're bringing to the table. And so I'm going to do this exercise to try and identify, okay, who is good at what in terms of that change management set of skills and capabilities. And that's going to help me identify what are the processes or tasks in my project that I can assign to these four roles that are going to help contribute to that execution of change management on the whole. So that's one exercise that you'd want to do is kind of assessing your team, what are the skills and experience they have, and how can they ultimately best contribute to change management. We also are going to lean on a number of change management resources. So beyond the team and their skills and their personal traits, I mentioned earlier that change management is a knowledge domain and it's a set of processes. So we're going to look at today a little bit about the ADKAR methodology. I'll give a brief walkthrough of what that is. I'll also walk through and provide some details on what are those 5 change management plans and strategies that we identified. So communications, training, and so forth. We also need to leverage people in the organization. So both our project sponsors, but also business champions that we can identify across the organization. And we want to leverage the face time we have with stakeholders to make change management happen. So as we all know, as we go through a project, we're doing a lot of activities. We're doing requirements gathering workshops and current state assessment. We're doing design workshops. We're doing training. We've got a lot of face time with stakeholders, and we're going to leverage that face time with them to make sure change management is happening as we go through our process. So every time you have an opportunity to meet with the stakeholder, it's an opportunity to drive positive change management with them. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to start by walking through, we're going to kind of take a step back to some of the fundamentals of change management. I'm going to describe the ADKAR methodology and those 5 change management plans as well, so we all have that context in mind. So the ADKAR model, this is a ProSci model they teach you out when you get your certification. So ADKAR is an acronym for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And the ADKAR model it's a sequential process you go through to manage individual change. So this is change for a single person. We're going to achieve change at the organization level, sort of by managing change with all the individuals we need to, as well as looking at things in a more holistic way. Through those 5 plans, we're going to address things that are more, holistic or at the organization level. But driving change for a group is driving change for each individual. So everyone needs to kind of come through this ad card journey together. And we need to be able to manage any roadblocks or barriers that we have along the way. And I'll talk a bit about what those things could be. So you need to start by cultivating both awareness and desire. So if people aren't, they don't know what's going on, they don't want to be involved, you're going to see people asking questions over and over. You're going to see lower productivity. You're going to see people, saying, "Hey, I'm out. I don't want to participate in this." They might even leave their job, pursue something new. You'll see people sort of hoarding information and resources, right? A bit of a natural human tendency. If we're unsure about something, we want to sort of be cautious and safe and maybe keep things close to our chest. Ultimately, it's going to delay the implementation of our project. So, and typically, one of the biggest barriers we will have in our process is cultivating desire with people. We'll talk about how we can address issues there in a moment. But that is often one of the bigger hurdles is getting people to really buy in. So we need to, communicate. We need to make sure that people want to buy in. We then need to give them both knowledge and ability. So knowledge and ability sound very similar, but there is a distinction here. And so knowledge really is giving, the training and the reference materials and the instructions that people need to use the new solution, to survive in the new change or in the new world post change. But that's not the same as ability. So maybe you've got all the training, all the knowledge you need, but you don't have the time to do it, or you don't have the role that you need or the right access or permissions. So having the ability is being able to apply that knowledge that you have, put that to use in your new solution. So you can give all the training you want, but if someone doesn't have access or doesn't have time to do this, that's going to still be a roadblock for them. So if you don't have those things, you won't see people adopting or using the system. You'll, hear a lot of fears and concerns. It'll start to impact things downstream of your project. So again, really important to both give people the knowledge, but also clear the roadblocks to give them the ability to apply it. And last but certainly not least is reinforcement. So you need people to sustain that change. You need those behaviors to stick. And so you need to be on top of that after go live. You need to be communicating, making sure people aren't slipping back into their old habits or using the system less and less as time goes on. So you need to be responsive and adaptive in the post project world as well to make sure that this change is reinforced. Some of the things you can do if you encounter a challenge along the way there, some of the things you can do to overcome that. So if you lack awareness, it's all about communicating. Communicate, communicate, communicate. For a project manager, I always say that is what a project manager should spend the majority of their time doing is communicating with people. But that it can't just come from the project team. It's got to come from senior leadership. It's got to come from your project sponsor. It has to happen in a number of modalities. So you want to do that face to face. You want to do that through email, through Teams, through posts on the internet. Everyone has a different way in which they sort of absorb and look for information. So you want to cover all your angles and make sure that you have a very thorough and broad use of your communication channels that are available. When it comes to cultivating desire, again, this is one of the biggest hurdles that we have. You need to articulate the benefits for people. You also want to look at techniques to manage resistance. So it's important to articulate benefits at the organization level. Why is this important for the whole organization to do? You need to articulate it for their team. Well, how does this help me and my close group of people or my boss? How does it make us and our team more successful? And then the individual level. So what's in it for me? We've probably all seen that, what's in it for me acronym out there, WIFM. And you really got to, articulate for people, how is this going to help you in your role? So if you can do those 3 things, articulate those benefits at those 3 levels, that's how you're going to start by trying to cultivate that desire. And then, if that's not working out, you're getting resistance. We are going to cover a few techniques for managing that resistance a little later in the webinar today. Once we've got that desire on board, knowledge is all about delivering training. So, you often want to take a kind of a blended approach of lecture and lab to training. That's one of the things that I believe is most effective. You got to deliver training at the right time. You got to make sure people have opportunities for refreshers and so forth. There's all these things that will be laid out in your training plan you create for your project. but that's how you're going to give people the knowledge. And as I mentioned earlier, giving ability is all about removing roadblocks to applying that knowledge. So maybe they need permissions, maybe they need more time, maybe they need coaching, maybe there's some troubleshooting we need to do, but we want to make sure that we are actively monitoring for and removing those roadblocks. And lastly, reinforcement. So again, this is all comes down to communicating, and this is where we often need to operationalize that communications and support into the organization. Because once we go live and we've wrapped up the project team's gone. It's now up to the organization to sustain that change. So we need to give senior leaders the tools that they need to do that over time. Make it easy for them. And so you want to be checking in proactively. You want to be responsive when you do hear concerns. Maybe there's incentives you provide as well for people's performance in their jobs. You want to give a toolkit, hand that off to operationalize post-project. Okay, so that was a lot about ADKAR, which is again the process for driving individual change. I'm just going to briefly speak to what these five plans and change management are at the project level, so a broader level than ADKAR, and then I'm going to show how the two relate. So your sponsorship plan ensures that you have an effective sponsor in place by defining who they are and what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and to be successful in your project, how are you going to make that easy for them? So if you can provide ways that sponsors can take the actions they need, with minimal effort and time on their part, because you're doing a lot of the legwork for them, that can be very effective. But I can't stress the importance of sponsorship enough. That is the number one contributor to project success. And I'll talk a little more about that sponsorship plan in a moment, but you want to have sponsors actively engaged. Communications plan, this one's very common. We're probably all familiar with this. So it's, the who, what, where, when, why, and how of delivering communications to our stakeholders. Our training plan, kind of similar. It has to be, tactical, practical, and something we can pick up in action. So what's the training we're going to provide? How are we going to provide it? To who, at what times, through what channels? What are the resources we have? So both that comms plan and training plan need to be very actionable. The last two, the coaching plan and the resistance management plan. So coaching is all about how are we going to set up leaders for success in coaching their staff, and how are we going to coach them through that? So there is a model that I'll describe that we go through for coaching, and then resistance management. So if we have challenges getting stakeholders to buy in, or putting up a fuss along the way, how are we going to respond to that? So the cool thing about this whole ProSign model is that individual change, so that ADKAR model you see across the top there, is linked to the organization level of change in our five plans. So you can sort of see here where you have like a darker blue box. So communications, for example, is key in driving awareness. It is absolutely critical, as well as in reinforcing. But you're going to leverage that through the rest of the steps as well. It's not quite the primary tool we're going to use, but it's relevant at all times. Our sponsor roadmap, we're going to leverage heavily around awareness and desire to achieve that, as well as to reinforce the change. Coaching happens at all stages throughout the project process. Training, that's all about delivering knowledge, but also supporting ability, clearing those roadblocks. And then again, resistance management, we'll use that to address any challenges in cultivating desire, but also it's going to be relevant when we reinforce the change going forward as well. So you can link the ADKAR model for individuals to those five plans for the organization and see how they relate. Another thing that we want to have a look at is, who do we have out there that's supporting or being impacted by our project? So I just wanted to find a few of these roles that we've talked a bit about today. Our project sponsor. So typically, and in the project management kind of best practice world, you have one project sponsor, one person who is, responsible for making decisions. It's often the person that's, signing the check for the project or funding it. Often that can be IT. When we're delivering technology, often your project sponsor might be a senior person within IT. But I want to distinguish that role from your business sponsors. So and there are going to be many business sponsors. So and that's who are you doing the project for? Who is the customer in this scenario? Who's going to use this new SharePoint solution that we're working on? And so this is probably someone at the same level in the organization as your project sponsor. So maybe that's a director, maybe that's a VP, something like that. But we want to have a number of business sponsors that we identify and we can leverage to communicate to their teams, to support their teams, help articulate, those benefits for them. Then we also have business champions. So these are typically people that are, a little lower in the organization than your sponsors, but these are the people who can be an advocate for us. There might be people who have influence, have been with the organization for a long time, someone that people, go to and listen to and need support from. So you want to try to identify who can advocate for us and spread the good word about our project that we're doing. You'll also do a lot of work with subject matter experts. So that's, who can contribute, who's got the knowledge and skills. These are the people that, are going to be hands on the keyboard using the solution, and they're going to help us by contributing requirements and validating design, doing, user acceptance testing, things like that. And then you've also got stakeholders at large. So, for our implementation, our example project here, we're doing SharePoint for the whole organization. So everyone's going to have to use it to manage their documents and execute their workflows and whatnot. So who will be impacted. In this case, it's going to be everyone. Um, and so these are just some of the roles that we have that we need to think about. How do we engage them, and how can we best leverage them to support change management? And I'm going to circle back now to the role of the project sponsor and just put some emphasis on that. So being a project sponsor, it's more than a title. It's more than attending the kickoff meeting and signing the checks to fund the project. We talk about in the ProSci project management methodology or change management methodology that there are the ABCs of sponsorship. So a sponsor needs to be active and visible and participating throughout the project. So they need to be doing things and people need to see that they are engaged. They also need to help build a coalition of sponsorship with other leaders. So when you think about you got this project sponsor and you have those business sponsors, we want to develop a coalition of sponsorship to help support the change throughout the organization and distribute some of that responsibility so that it's not all on your one project sponsor to be communicating across the entire organization. They may send some broad all emails like that, but you want to have leaders in each line of business supporting that and delivering that to their teams and putting a finer point on, what does this mean for us? Why is it important for us? And the C is to communicate directly with staff. So you want sponsors. Again, that's part of how they are visible. How are they showing up that they're active in the project? It's through communicating a lot of the time. So those are the ABCs of project sponsorship. And just to expand a little more on the B, building a coalition of sponsorship. It's something that you as a change manager, or if you're doing a change management role, like in our example today, you need to do some analysis on this and sort of figure out who should be in my coalition of sponsorship. So it's often effective to leverage a bottom-up approach. So look at what are all the business units and business functions we have in our organization and sort of follow the reporting structure up a little bit, or looking at who is influential in those different lines of business and sort of roll that up until you get to the right level of usually relatively senior leadership. So this might be people that are commonly at the director level. I find it could be people at the VP level. It could be senior managers as well, but typically it's people that are fairly senior in the organization and have responsibility over a number of business areas. With this coalition of sponsorship, you need to keep it a manageable size as well. So you want to find people at the right level where you're covering all your bases, but without having like 100 people that are part of this coalition. Um, so again, it's based on who is being impacted. It is not necessarily your org chart. You need to do some analysis and sort of map this out, and it might look a little bit different from your org chart. But again, starting by the bottom up, looking at who's impacted at your broad level of stakeholders, and then rolling that up to identify those leaders who have influence and direction over those groups. And that's who you sort of flag to be in your coalition of sponsorship. So this is all kind of laid out in your sponsorship plan. We're not doing a deep dive on how to make that plan in particular today, but this is what the plan needs to articulate. And then what is the role of those people? How is that one project sponsor going to help sort of align everyone at that level and make sure they're taking action to be, again, active and visible throughout the project? Communications and training plan, these ones are pretty straightforward. We're probably all familiar with those. Again, we need to make sure that they are something you can pick up in action. So it's, like the 5 Ws, and how are we going to deliver both communications and training. And I think that's a key point too, is it needs to be something that someone can actually pick up and go do. So my training plan should be like, okay, I need to schedule these sessions on these days with these people for this amount of time. Here's the materials we're going to add. Both of these plans, training and communications, need to be highly detailed and actionable. The coaching and resistance management plans. The coaching plan is based on what's called the Clark coaching model. So Clark is again an acronym. It stands for coach, liaison, advocate, uh, manage resistance, and communicate. So these are all the things that a coach should be. And it's going to outline how are they going to do those things and how are we going to get them sort of skilled up to be able to execute that effectively. There are a list of resistance management techniques that ProSci has, which I've listed a few here, and I've added a couple of my own as well. So one at the top that we is a foundational philosophy for us at Gravity Union is the concept of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So what really drives people to do something, or what gets people doing their jobs and enjoying it? Well, they want to have some autonomy, so people want to feel like they have some control. In this case, it's going to be control over the solution design. They want to have some say in how this is built. They want to define the requirements. They want to, test to validate that, yeah, this works for me. So you got to put them in the driver's seat a little bit. Mastery. So people like to do what they are good at. So this is where your training plan really, comes to light, and you want to deliver the skills and knowledge that people need to become really good at their craft. That will drive people to want to do it if they're good at it. And then purpose. People want to feel a sense of purpose in their lives. So, they know that what they're doing has an impact. They know why they're doing it. So if you can sort of highlight those three things, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your change management strategy, those are three sort of, humanistic factors that are going to drive adoption and usage of your solution and get people to do the things that you're needing them to do. Things in the rest of the list, these are kind of more from the ProSci textbook. So of course we want to listen, understand objections, get people to focus on the what and less so on the how, especially early on. Like you want to give that message like we're going to get to the how, but first we want you to understand what we are doing and why. You want to give people some choice. Again, that links back to the autonomy thing. You want to be able to remove barriers for them, show benefits. You might actually need to make a personal appeal at times. So thinking back to, who has those skill sets around like empathy and building relationships with stakeholders. Sometimes, if you have a stakeholder who's tricky, you got to just ask for a favor. And if you build a good relationship with that person, that can actually be quite effective. Um, the other thing that I want to mention here is converting the strongest dissenters. So I firmly believe and have seen through the projects I've done that the people who can be the most vocally opposed to your project can also become the strongest supporters if you can get them bought into your project and your change. So they're people that are often vocal. People, listen to them in the organization. They have a lot of influence. So don't avoid those people that are maybe vocally opposed. You want to engage them directly and prioritize engagement with them and get them working for you instead of against you. So, the key message there is don't shy away from those vocal opponents. You want to engage them and get them on board. So hopefully that was a helpful overview of those 5 change management plans. I've got a poll next, so we're going to take a pause here so you have a moment to answer. But and I this is based on ProSci research, but I'm interested to know what people in the audience think here about who typically resists change from your perspective. Who are the most vocal opponents or people that you may have the hardest time winning over? So I'll give a moment here for people to fill out that poll. We'll have a look at what you said, and then I'll show you what the ProSci research says as well. Okay, so as the results are coming in here, so far the leader is frontline employees, but fairly distributed throughout the rest across executives, directors, senior managers, and mid-level managers. But frontline employees still that's the top choice in the from the audience here. So let's have a look at what the ProSci research actually says in this regard, and it might surprise you. So ProSci's research would indicate that mid-level management are the most likely to resist change. They are people that have, and I think I kind of understand why this is. These are people that have direct influence and control over your frontline employees and stakeholders that are going to be hands on the keyboard using the solution every day. So they are highly influential. They're in a position of power. They're close enough to the ground that they can have a big impact on your project, and they're probably highly involved in your project, but they're also close enough to senior leadership that they can have some influence that direction as well. So they're a really critical stakeholder to engage and make sure they're on side. And typically they do provide the most resistance across those roles. So I recall this when I went through my ProSci certification. I recall this stat, and it always really stood out to me, and I kept that in mind is when I'm putting together my plans around business management and coaching and all of those five plans really is, how am I focusing on mid-level management to get them engaged and get them bought into the project? So we're going to take kind of a return now to what we started looking at earlier, which is integrating change management activities to our project roles. But I'll just pause really quickly in case there's any questions.
No questions so far. I think we're doing great. But to the audience, if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to share them in the chat or in the Q&A section. Oh, I guess we have one right now.
I can see it in the chat. So I see one. I often see customers, teams, or key stakeholders lagging behind users going through adoption, which creates problems during handover. How do you handle this? Should they go through adoption with everyone else or have a separate parallel stream? Um, Good question. So, and I presume you're talking about perhaps the customers of your customers. So maybe you're rolling out a new solution that staff are going to use, but also people in the public are going to use as well, or some other stakeholders, stakeholders of your stakeholders, you could call it. So we need to be considerate of that, and we need to accommodate that in our change management plan. So those five plans, you'd want to have, I guess, in that scenario, perhaps a different section in your plan for addressing internal stakeholders and users versus maybe external or that kind of, stakeholders of your stakeholders. And you want to make sure that you're leveraging like your coaching model, for example, to set up the people that are closer to you for success in coaching the people they need to coach. That's really what the coaching plan is all about. It's not about how am I going to coach these stakeholders. It's how are those stakeholders going to coach their stakeholders or their, direct reports. So I would recommend that we need to do that, I'd say, in parallel. I'd say you'd want to have some dedicated parts of your plan to address both those things, though, because they are going to require a bit of a different lens, different methods, different techniques. You may have different communication channels available or different, training channels or modalities available. So you do want to focus on both. You may need to prep your, internal users before you try to address the second. So I'm not saying they need to happen at the same time entirely in parallel, but you do want to have them both addressed and probably be actively working on that the entire time.
Thanks, Dylan. Someone else shared here some additional skills that may be helpful if not previously mentioned. So we got facilitation, change impact assessment, organization awareness, and metrics gathering. Thank you for
Yeah,
that. What are your thoughts on that, Dylan?
absolutely. Yeah, those are all helpful bubbles. And we're going to have a look at those skills we talked about earlier are going to surface in the next couple slides. So yeah, keep those additional things in mind as we go through that. Those are all great call outs. Okay, so how are we going to integrate change management into the other project roles we have? So again, we've got these five plans we need to execute that are going to help us manage change. We've got these four roles. And so how am I going to connect A to B? How am I going to associate roles on the left side with the activities that are in the plans on the right side? So again, we're going to look back to what we had earlier in mapping our project roles to those skill sets. And thanks to the person that provided the additional skill sets that in the chat there. So think about those four things, add them to the list here. Again, this is only an example. This will vary from team to team, so you need to do this assessment based on the people, their experience, their skills, their personal traits, and map that out. But what that's going to allow us to do is figure out, okay, which roles are going to contribute to which of those plans. And so in the example we have today, I'm going to get my project manager to take a huge part in executing the sponsorship plan as well as the communications plan. I'm going to leverage my business analyst again for the communications plan and also in the training plan. My technical specialist, they're going to be involved in the training plan as well as, of course, also is the trainer. But in terms of that training plan, you see we've got a few different arrows connecting there, a few different roles that are involved. Because there are sort of your, I guess, formal elements of training and learning that you would deliver through, maybe lecture, maybe lab, but sort of, formal and dedicated training activities. But that's not where the learning journey ends. People then, need to go sit down. They need to actually start to apply those skills. They might have questions along the way. So, for example, maybe I've delivered a training session on how to run a migration to move content into the new SharePoint environment. So the trainer has done that. And then we sit down and start to do it. And, my stakeholders have questions. They have some challenges. Maybe that's where the technical specialist comes in and gives them some, side by side, peer-to-peer support for how to manage that. Your business analysts, they are probably going to have the most face time with stakeholders throughout the project. So again, they can have a hand in supporting learning. They could even, help to deliver training. Often in my projects, my business analyst is also my trainer. So that's certainly a fit there as well. And again, because they have so much face time with stakeholders, they are consistently communicating and should be executing that communications plan. In this example, again, my trainer also has the skills to be able to implement that coaching plan and help set up people for success in coaching their reports and their stakeholders. And I personally believe that everyone has a role in managing resistance, and your whole project team needs to, have those resistance management techniques in mind because that resistance can surface sometimes when you least expect it. Maybe you're, in a one-on-one conversation with someone and they make a comment that sort of makes a light bulb go off like, oh, this person, they've got some, concerns here. I need to be able to address that. So, and you want to be very responsive and responsive in a timely manner to that resistance. So that's part of the reason why I think it's very important that everyone has a hand in managing resistance because as soon as it surfaces, you want to be able to address that like immediately in real time and have it done by the person who is having that conversation. So, if it's your technical specialist, for example, having a one-on-one chat with like a developer or another technical resource and they have a concern, you don't want to have to say, well, let me take that back to my, project manager and we'll, discuss that, next week when we all have time. You want them to be able to respond in real time and execute that. Um, so in this example, this is the way that I've mapped these roles to those change management plans. And we'll have a look in the next few slides about what are some of the key activities that they're going to do in terms of executing those things. So we'll start with the project manager. So in their involvement in the sponsorship plan and communications plan, some of the things that I'm going to leverage them to do, one would be to developing and sending communications or developing and handing off communications to other leaders to send. So you often want messages to come from someone's boss or from a senior person in the organization. But I often find it effective if you draft a communication for them to send, it makes their job a whole lot easier. They're a whole lot more likely to do it and do it when they need to. So that's going to be a key activity for our PM here. Communication is a two-way street, so we're also going to get them to gather feedback as they go about their jobs and do that. I'm also going to leverage the project manager to engage with our sponsors and get their buy-in. So, we might have a change manager reaching out on that sponsorship plan to identify, hey, project sponsor and business sponsors, what do we need you to do to be successful? I'm going to look to my PM to do that. I think they've got the skills, to engage people at the executive level and get their buy-in. And part of that buy-in, again, as we talked about earlier, is defining the benefits, identifying what does success look like for this project. What's that going to do for you at the end of the day? How am I going to measure that success and evaluate that through the project as well as beyond? So again, I'm going to lean on the PM to do those things, and then be following up with the sponsor, managing their tasks, and making sure that they're staying active and visible throughout the project. And yeah, not to forget resistance management. Anytime your PM, is going to identify that, we want them to respond to that. For our business analysts, so we had them mapped to our communications plan and our training plan. So because they spend so much face-to-face time with stakeholders, we want them to be able to, leverage that time to communicate. So we want to equip them with some key messages that they need to sort of keep in mind as they're communicating with stakeholders and, leveraging their opportunities to have meetings and FaceTime to do that. It's also a time to get feedback and be a good active listener. So we want to be, listening to people's concerns or questions. We want to be proactively, trying to get that out of them. So I think you need to be both proactive and reactive. So if someone brings a concern right to you, of course you're going to address that, but you want to ask the right questions to uncover if there are any issues. Because often people, if it's a small thing, they might just, kind of sit on it. They don't want to, make a fuss. They don't necessarily want to mention it. Or create conflict or anything. So and sometimes until you ask the question, people don't mention that they've had an issue. So it's important to be proactive in that. And you have so much face time between your BA and stakeholders that that's a good thing for them to do. They also can leverage that face-to-face time to demonstrate what success looks like. So maybe this is, doing a walkthrough of how to use a solution in the context of a given business process and showing the outcomes. So and this is a way that we can sort of, I guess, show how you're going to realize the benefits of the solution. So they're also key in identifying those benefits. up front as well. So they are going to have the best understanding of stakeholder requirements. What's going to drive these people to use the solution? What's going to make it successful for them? How can I support their learning either through delivering training or supporting training, answering questions after people have gotten training. These are all some of the things that I'm going to look for my BA to do. And that's going to be defined in both the communications and training plan, as well as the project process that they'll apply. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. For my technical specialists, so in this example, I said they were going to support training. I mentioned, kind of that peer-to-peer support Q&A, especially after formal training has been delivered. They also might be the right people to identify what the training needs are. So, hey, in our solution or with our process, this is one of the more trickier technical pieces. Let's focus on that. Or we need people to be able to have this as a learning outcome because I've done this job. I know it needs to be done. And again, helping to realize those benefits as well. So, working with stakeholders, leveraging that peer-to-peer sort of contact to help people realize, hey, like, how does this actually help me in my role? And lastly, our trainer, of course, the trainer is going to be a huge part of the training plan. I'm also going to leverage their skills here for the coaching plan because they've got that sort of those skills and abilities to be able to, give people knowledge, help support them through things. So I'm going to get them to do the same thing in terms of setting up other people, other leaders for success in coaching their reports and their stakeholders. So the trainer is going to, both develop and deliver the training materials. They're going to work with leaders and how to support their staff through change. They're going to contribute to communications as well through that training plan. And they're going to ask for feedback through the training sessions as well. So again, it's face time. It's an opportunity to be proactive in asking for feedback. And again, with every role, everyone's going to have a part in managing resistance along the way. So if we look at how we integrate these 4 roles into those 5 plans and what are some of the things they'll be doing, that's going to make us all one piece of a change management pie. So we don't have a change manager, but we are executing change management as a team. Okay, next we're going to talk about some of the things we can do from a project perspective to actually make this happen. So we've talked about, what are the roles and what are they going to be doing to achieve change management. But I often find it is effective to, embed that into a process. So again, just to kind of reflect on our example scenario, we're implementing SharePoint Online for an entire organization. And we know sort of who has what skills, and we know how those are going to fit into our 5 plans. But how do we actually put those plans into practice and actually make them happen? For some, it can be easier than others. Our training plan, well, we know we go schedule these sessions, we deliver this training, and so forth. But I find to get sort of a holistic, successful outcome with change management, you want to embed change management fundamentals and activities of those plans into a projectized process. So for our example here, for a SharePoint implementation, this is going to be a consistent procedure that we're going to go through with all departments or business units in the organization. It's common for my projects that you will start with a pilot, so you're going to do a couple groups first, have some success there, then you're going to move on and roll out the SharePoint solution to the rest of the organization in a staggered fashion, where at any given time you're working with a few groups and doing their implementation. And this might take you a year or a couple years to execute for a large organization. And so you sort of have this rolling and repeatable process that you're doing. So the keys there with that process are having it well defined so you can apply it consistently. And consistency in your process is what's going to get you consistent outcomes. And getting consistent outcomes is what's going to ensure that you have success with both adoption and sustained usage of your solution. So doing things consistently for all stakeholders is going to create consistent outcomes. So the more you can embed change management activities and change management kind of fundamentals and philosophy into that repeatable rollout process, that's what's going to allow you to actually take those 5 change management plans and the people that are executing them and make it part of kind of the work you do day to day. So to do that, I'm going to share a little bit about what our process looks like at Gravity Union. So we have a 4-step process. This is kind of our standard. We adapt it based on the particular project or client or scenario, but we have a 4-step process that you see starting with prepare and envision, where we're gathering current state information. We're discovering what kind of content, so documents and records that that the group has. We're showing them what's possible in the world of SharePoint, and ultimately we're defining the requirements that are they're gonna drive the solution design. We then move on to our second step of designing and building. So I'm not going to go into deep detail on all this, but we often do a card sorting activity. This is a way that people can kind of, in a tactile way, sort their information into different categories. This helps us to define our SharePoint information architecture and our solution structure. We're going to go through a series of iterative reviews of a prototype before we get to that solution that we're going to use long term. We're going to test it and so forth. So that's all part of the design and build process. We're then, of course, going to migrate our content in. We're going to go live. We're going to provide support after go live. We're going to configure records management and do our transition to operations and retrospective and so forth. So all I have to say, we have, for this example, we're going to leverage this defined process, and we're going to repeat this for each group in a consistent way. And so another exercise that you can do to figure out, well, how do I get change management worked into this process is by mapping it to both ADKAR as well as those 5 change management plans. So if I think about, taking individuals through the ADKAR process to make change happen, I'm going to think about, okay, well, what are my opportunities to drive awareness in my project process? Do I have enough activities or steps defined that it's going to make awareness happen? So I'm able to send communications and get people in the know. How am I going to cultivate desire? So what are some of the activities that I have that are going to build that desire and articulate what's possible and what the benefits are? Again, where does knowledge come from? Well, that's largely training. The ability, so creating opportunities to then apply that training and reinforcement. So the message here is to sit down with ADKAR, sit down with your repeatable project process, and make sure that you've checked all your boxes and covered all your bases, and you know where you're going to be addressing each of the items in this 5-step model within your project implementation process. And likewise, for those 5 change management plans, I'm going to map them to my project process as well to see where they fit and make sure that I have sufficient activities to meet the goals and required outcomes of each of those plans by executing the process steps that we go through here. So again, this is a way to you kind of sit down. You can make a checklist out of it if you like, and make sure that for example, my sponsor roadmap, all the things that I need my sponsors to be doing, we're going to address those and make sure that they are happening as part of our repeatable process, and so on for the other 4 plans as well. So that's kind of looking at ways that we can look at those 2 big models of change management, ADKAR and the 5 plans, and integrate them into our project process that we're going to do in a consistent and repeatable manner. The last thing that we're going to do is to formalize the roles that we identified for people. So again, if you recall, we mapped our 4 project roles to some of the activities that they'll do and how they're going to contribute to those 5 change management plans. But you also need to formalize that role. So it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to make sure that it actually happens. And a vehicle to achieve that is by formally making it part of those people's responsibilities. So as you create your RACI chart, which outlines the responsibilities, accountabilities, and who's consulted and informed for every project activity, as I fill out that RACI chart, I'm going to formalize those change management activities into the roles of each individual, make sure that it's defined, it's being communicated, and they are very clear on what they need to be doing. And ultimately, you need to hold them accountable. So you need to be revisiting that and making sure that those people are executing those activities within their role, and they understand and agree with that being part of their role. So again, just to kind of to recap, to make this happen, we want to both formalize it as part of people's roles. We want to map both the 5 plans and the ICAR process to our project implementation process. And by doing those things, that's how I'm going to make change management happen without a change manager. So again, the key messages that I'd like everyone to take away from this webinar today are that even though you don't have a change management role, you still have a set of processes for change management. You have knowledge, you have resources that are out there around how to execute change management. You have people that have those skills on your project team, and you just need to figure out who has which skills and where they are, identify gaps, things like that. And by doing those, we can make sure that we are fully leveraging change management to get success in our project. So again, we're all here today because we know change management is important. And there's a lot out there that we can leverage and integrate to the existing roles we have to have success at the end of the day. And one of my favorite corny phrases is teamwork makes the dream work. And that's really the message here in this webinar is that you can get this done without that dedicated role. So we've got about 4 minutes here if there's any other questions or comments.
Yes. I know we answered a few questions along the way earlier, but if there are follow-up questions, we can maybe answer one or two since we're at time. But if there are more questions, especially after the call, feel free to save this contact form right here. You can contact us through our website. We'll make sure to reach out to you guys or answer the question in our follow-up email.
Okay, if no other questions, yeah, thanks again to everyone for your time today and your attention. Hope you enjoyed this webinar.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.